This is lecture 59B in the ABCs of Communism and Bolshevism 2018 series. Volume 3 is Communism in East Asia, and when you get your book next year, this will be in the chapter on Indonesia, which is next to the last chapter in Volume 3. At any rate, our subject today is the Servitude epoch in Indonesia, slavery, feudalism, and mercantile capitalism. Now, as you'll recall, Austronesian-speaking peoples are the majority of the modern population, and as we've seen, they probably migrated from Taiwan. At any rate, they arrived in Indonesia around 2000 BC, that is 4,000 years ago, and spread through the archipelago. This diaspora confined the indigenous Melanesian peoples to the far eastern regions of the Indonesian islands, of which there are about 1,000. Ideal agricultural conditions and the mastering of wet field rice cultivation as early as 800 BC was the economic foundation for advanced theocratic chiefdoms and slave stage kingdoms that flourished by the 1st century AD. Indonesia's strategic sea lane position fostered inter-island and international trade. The latter included trade with Indian and Chinese kingdoms by 300 BC. The mercantile capitalists within the slave and feudal stage kingdoms shaped Indonesian history thereafter. Now, Sulawesi is the first of the major islands we're going to take a look at. The settlement of South Sulawesi by modern humans dated to at least 30,000 years ago, when I was an archaeology graduate student. That dating was from radiocarbon dates obtained from rock shelters in Maros. Even then, though, we knew the island almost certainly formed part of the land bridge used for the settlement of Australia and New Guinea by at least 40,000 years ago. But there was no evidence of Homo erectus having reached Sulawesi. So, the stone tools discovered in 1947 on the right bank of the Walane River at Beru, Indonesia, dated to perhaps 50,000 years ago. Portuguese freebooters gave Celebes as the name for the island that is today Sulawesi. In Indonesia, Sulawesi is one of the 4 greater Sunda Islands. It is the world's 11th largest island and is situated east of Borneo, west of the Maluku Islands, and south of Mindanao and the Sulu Archipelago. Within Indonesia, only Sumatra, Borneo, and Papua are larger in territory, and only in Java and Sumatra are there larger populations. Sulawesi encloses an area of 67,500 square miles. The central part of the island is ruggedly mountainous, so the peninsulas of the island have been remote from each other, with better connections by sea than by road. Now, the Strait of Makassar runs along the western side of the island, and the island is surrounded by Borneo to the west, by the Philippines to the north, by Maluku to the east, and by Flores and Timor to the south. The landmass of Sulawesi includes 4 peninsulas. These are the northern Minahasa Peninsula, the East Peninsula, the South Peninsula, and the Southeast Peninsula. 3 gulfs separate these peninsulas. These are the Gulf of Tomini between the northern Minahasa and East Peninsulas, the Tolo Gulf between the East and Southeast Peninsulas, and the Bone Gulf between the South and Southeast Peninsulas. The Strait of Makassar runs along the western side of the island and separates the island from Borneo. The 3 bays that divide Sulawesi's peninsula are from north to south, the Tomini, the Tolo, and the Bone. These separate the Minahasa, or northern peninsula, the East Peninsula, the Southeast Peninsula, and the South Peninsula. The name Sulawesi comes from the word Sula, meaning island, and Besi, meaning iron. Iron was the principal export by ATC times, dredged from Lake Matano's rich iron deposits. In Sanskrit, the word for a trident is Triusula, and that can be shortened to Sula. So for both these reasons, Sulawesi was used to describe an island that produced iron-edged weapons and came into common use in English following Indonesian independence. The Silayar Islands make up a peninsula stretching southwards from the southwest Sulawesi into the Flores Sea and are administratively part of Sulawesi. Sagahi Islands and Talaud Islands stretch northward from the northeastern tip of Sulawesi, while Buton Island and its neighbors lie off its southeast peninsula. The Togian Islands are in the Gulf of Tomini, and the Pelang Island and Bangai Islands form a cluster between Sulawesi and Maluku. All the above-mentioned islands and many smaller ones are administratively parts of South Sulawesi's 6 provinces. Now, Muslim traders traveled through Southeast Asia by AD 700, and Islamized northern Sumatra dates to the AD 1200s. So soon other Indonesian islands adopted Islam by the end of the AD 1500s. Imported Islam mixed with autochthonous culture and religion. The Bugis is the most numerous group today and prehistorically lived around Lakes Tempe and Sindaring in the Wallane Depression. Here for some 2,000 years lived the linguistic ancestral stock of the modern Bugis. Linguistic anthropologists believe the archaic name of this group was Ugik. The linguistic relatives of the Bugis are the Toraja. The political economy would have begun from hunting and gathering tribes, evolved to tribal agriculture, and slash-and-burn agriculture. Pre-AD 1200 Bugis society was organized into advanced theocratic chiefdoms where planting of wet rice occurred along the margins of lakes and rivers. In central Sulawesi there are over 400 granite megaliths that archaeologists have dated, spanning the period from 5,000 years ago to AD 1300. They vary in size from quite small to 15 feet in height. We know that megaliths elsewhere are associated with the terminal primitive chiefdom and early ATC stages, and about 30 of the Sulawesi megaliths are of human forms. Other megaliths are in form of large pots, and these are called kalamba, and stone plates called tutuna. Pre-AD 1200 Bugis society was all organized as advanced theocratic chiefdoms. Starting in the AD 1200s, access to prestige trade goods and to sources of iron started to permit ambitious individuals to build larger political units. The idea that being better off is being part of reality had taken hold for some persons. The choice was obvious. In AD 1367, several polities identified located on the island were mentioned in a Javanese manuscript called Nagar Karet Tagama, dating from the Majapahit period. The Canto 14 document mentions polities including Goa, Makassar, Luwu, and Bangai. It seems by the AD 1300s, polities in the island were connected in an archipelago-like maritime trading network. That network was headquartered in Majapahit port in East Java. In AD 1400, a number of agricultural kingdoms had arisen in the western Cenerana Valley. Others were arising on the south coast, and on the west coast near modern Parepare. The first Europeans to visit Sulawesi were Portuguese privateers Simão de Abreu in 1523 and Gomes de Sequeira in 1525. Both were pirates licensed as privateers in the Moluccas. These and others were sent to search for and steal gold from the natives on Sulawesi. Local chiefs had become kings by being advocates of free trade, as its taxation was the major source of their income. A Portuguese enclave had been installed in Makassar in the first decades of the AD 1500s to oversee this transition from ATC to kingdom and to ensure that it benefited them, the Portuguese. In 1605, the Dutch had arrived in Sulawesi, and the English quickly followed them. British privateers established a factory in Makassar making fine veneer oils. Thus they made the transition from pirate to mercantile capitalist. In 1660, the Dutch were at war with Goa, the major Makassar west coast power. The Portuguese occupiers kept Makassar until 1665, and then the Dutch took it from them. In 1669, Admiral Spielman forced the ruler, Sultan Hassanuddin, to sign the Treaty of Bangaya, which handed control of trade to the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch privateers suborned the Bugis warlord Arung Palaka, ruler of the Bugis kingdom of Bone, to accomplish this. They built a fort at Ujung Pandang with Arung Palaka as the regional overlord and Bone the dominant kingdom. Now in central Sulawesi in AD 1555, the Portuguese had built a fort in Parigi, where the Kali people were at the ATC stage and based in the Palu Valley. They considered themselves related to the Toraja. Now in Java, which is an island in Indonesia, in 2015 had a population of over 145 million. It is home to 57% of the Indonesian population and is the most populous island on Earth. The Indonesian capital city of Jakarta, earlier called Batavia, is located on western Java, and Java dominates Indonesia politically, economically, and culturally. Now, in this case, fossilized remains of Homo erectus, popularly known as Java Man, date 1.7 million years ago and were found along the banks of the Bengawan Solo River. Java was the center of 1. The powerful Hindu-Buddhist Indonesian empires, 2. The capital of the Islamic Sultanates, 3. The core of the colonial Dutch East Indies, and 4. The center of the Indonesian struggle for independence during the 1930s and 1940s. Formed mostly as the result of volcanic eruptions, Java is the 13th largest island in the world, and the 5th largest in Indonesia by landmass. A chain of volcanic mountains forms an east-west spine along the island. 3 main languages spoken on the island are Javanese, Sudanese, and Malarese. Javanese is the native language of about 60 million people in Indonesia. Furthermore, most residents are bilingual, speaking Indonesian, the official language of Indonesia, as their first or second language, while the majority of people of Java are Muslim. Java has a diverse mixture of religious beliefs, ethnicities, and cultures, and it is divided into 4 provinces: West Java, Central Java, East Java, and Banten, and 2 special regions, Jakarta, or what was before Batavia, and Yogyakarta. Java lies between Sumatra to the west and Bali to the east. Borneo lies to the north, and Christmas Island is to the south. Java is the world's 13th largest island and is surrounded by the Java Sea to the north, the Sunda Strait to the west, the Indian Ocean to the south, and the Bali Strait and Madura Strait in the east. Java is almost entirely of volcanic origin, with 38 volcanic mountains forming an east-west spine. The highest of these is Mount Semeru at 11,950 feet. The most active volcano in Java and in Indonesia is Mount Merapi at 9,230 feet. More mountains and highlands help to split the interior into a series of relatively isolated regions suitable for wet rice cultivation, and these rice lands in Java are among the richest in the world. In 1699, Java was the first place where Indonesian coffee was grown. Today, small farmers and latifundistas grow Arabian coffee on the Ijen Plateau. The area of Java is approximately 150,000 square kilometers. It is 620 miles long, and at its widest point 130 miles. The island's longest river is the 600-kilometer-long Solo River, and the river rises from its source in central Java at the Lawu volcano, then flows north and eastward to its mouth in the Java Sea near the city of Surabaya. Other major rivers are Brantas, Citarum, Simamuk, and Serayu. The average temperatures range from 22 degrees centigrade to 29 degrees centigrade. Average humidity is 75%. The northern coastal plains are normally hotter, averaging 34 degrees centigrade during the day in the dry season. The south coast is generally cooler than the north, and highland area inland are always cooler. The wet season begins in November and ends in April, when rain falls mostly in the afternoons and intermittently during other parts of the year. The wettest months are January and February. West Java is wetter than East Java. Mountainous regions receive the most rainfall. The Parahiangan highlands of West Java receive over 4,000 millimeters annually, while the north coast of East Java receives 900 millimeters annually. The natural environment of Java is tropical rainforest. Ecosystems range from coastal mangrove forests on the north coast, rocky coastal cliffs on the southern coast, and low-lying tropical forests to high-altitude rainforests on the slopes of mountainous volcanic regions in the interior. The Java environment and climate gradually alters from west to east, from wet and humid dense rainforest in western parts to a dry savanna environment in the east, corresponding to the climate and rainfall in these regions. Originally, Java supported a rich diversity of wildlife. This biodiversity included many endemic species of flora and fauna, now gone. Once flourishing were the Javan rhinoceros, banteng, warty pig, hawk eagle, peafowl, silvery gibbon, Javan lutung, mouse deer, rusa, and leopard. Today, over 450 species of birds and 37 endemic species make Java an ornithological paradise. Java has 130 freshwater fish species. Since Neolithic times, people have cleared the rainforest, altering the ecosystem and shaping the landscapes into rice paddy and terraces. These rice terraces have supported agricultural ATCs and kingdoms for over 1,000 years. Accordingly, human population growth has put severe pressure on Java's wildlife. Rainforests were diminished and confined to highland slopes or isolated peninsulas. Some of Java's endemic species are now critically endangered, with some already extinct. Java used to have tigers and elephants, but both of those are extinct. Several national parks protect the remnants of its fragile wildlife at Ujung Kulon, Mount Halaman Salak, Gidi Pangrango, Ballaran, Meru Betiri, and Alas Purwo. The island's exceptional fertility and rainfall allowed the development of ATC wet field rice cultivation, and from some of these, small kingdoms developed. The chain of volcanic mountains and associated highlands running the length of Java kept its interior regions and peoples separate and relatively isolated. Before the advent of Islamic states and European colonialism, the rivers provided the main means of communication, although Java's many rivers are mostly short. Only the Brantas and Sala rivers could provide long-distance communication, and their valleys supported the centers of major kingdoms. By AD 600, the powerful Srivijaya naval trading kingdom flourished. Hinduism and Buddhism that were imported went there. Now, between the 8th and 10th centuries AD, the agricultural Buddhist Sailendra and Hindu Mataram dynasties thrived and then declined in inland Java. They left behind religious monumental architecture at Borobudur, Siwu, and Prambanan. By AD 825, the capital of the kingdom shifted from Mataram area in central Java to the Brantas River Valley in East Java. The king was named Empu Sendak, and he established the Isiana dynasty. Subsequently, a series of Javanese Hindu-Buddhist polities rose and fell. Most notably is the kingdom of Karupan, ruled by Erlanga, Kadiri, and Singa Hasari. In AD 1030 in West Java, the Sunda kingdom was re-established. The Warma Dewas established their rule on the kingdom of Bali in the AD 900s. The Hindu Majapahit kingdom was founded in eastern Java in AD 1275, and under Gajah Mada its influence stretched over much of Indonesia. Now, although Muslim traders first traveled through Southeast Asia early in the Islamic era, the earliest evidence of Islamized populations in Indonesia dates to the AD 1200s in northern Sumatra. Other Indonesian areas gradually adopted Islam, and it was the dominant religion in Java and Sumatra by the end of the AD 1500s. In AD 1512, the first regular contact between Europeans and the peoples of Indonesia began when Portuguese traders led by Francisco Serrao sought to monopolize the sources of nutmeg, cloves, and cubeb pepper in Maluku. Dutch and British traders followed. Then in 1602 the Dutch established the Dutch East India Company. From here on out we call VOC. And in the following decades the Dutch gained footholds in Batavia, that is now Jakarta, and Amboina. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries AD, the VOC was the dominant European power in the archipelago. Now, by AD 1650, a system of roads, permanent bridges, and toll gates was established in Java. Road usage, however, was highly dependent on constant maintenance. Otherwise, communication between Java's communities was difficult if not conducted by sea. In 1675, the development in Europe of winter forage made spices less of a necessity, as livestock did not have to be slaughtered in autumn and its meat preserved with spices over the cold season. By 1780, the VOC's greed and short-sightedness led to its undoing. Its personnel were extraordinarily corrupt. They were determined to, quote, shake the pagoda tree, unquote, of the Indies, to use a phrase popular with its British contemporaries that meant to get rich quick. The VOC tried to preserve its monopoly over the spice trade, but it could not prevent British and French capitalists from growing opium and spices on their own territories. Europeans therefore had a cheap supply of drugs and spices from a variety of sources. The 1780 to 1784 war between the Netherlands and Britain prevented the VOC from shipping its goods, so it turned to new cash crops and products, namely pepper and textiles from Sumatra, and coffee and tea grown in the mountainous Prangan districts. Prangan was the home of the Sudanese ethnic group whose rulers collected coffee from cultivators and delivered it to the VOC. Coffee was Java's most profitable crop from the early 1700s to 1850. Even so, the Dutch Staten General in 1789 discovered the company had a deficit of 74 million guilders. One of those things where I don't know where it went. In 1795, the Netherlands was occupied by French troops and a French protectorate established. The new government abolished the de facto bankrupt VOC, allowing its charter to lapse in 1799, so VOC territories became the property of the Dutch government. In its place, the government of the Netherlands established the Dutch East Indies as a nationalized colony. And we will pick up this story below in the section on the capitalist stage of sociocultural evolution in Indonesia. For most of the colonial period, Dutch control over the archipelago was tenuous outside of coastal strongholds. Only in the early 1900s did Dutch dominance extend to what was to become Indonesia's current boundaries. Japanese occupation during World War II ended Dutch rule and encouraged the previously suppressed Indonesian independence movement. Despite major internal political, social, and sectarian divisions during the National Revolution, Indonesians found unity in their fight for independence. Now, in West and East Java, kingdoms arose, namely the Taruma and Sunda kingdoms of Western Java, appearing in the 4th and 7th centuries AD, respectively. In AD 640, the Kalinga kingdom sent an ambassador to China. In AD 700, the Medang kingdom was founded in central Java by Indian privateers who used their religion as the opening wedge against native ATCs and kingdoms' supernatural deities. Thus, Medang's religion evolved around the Hindu god Shiva. It produced some of the Java's earliest Hindu temples on the Dieng Plateau. By AD 750, the Sailendra dynasty was created by other pirates in the Kidu plain. For them, the opening wedge was Buddhism. In the AD 800s, the Sailendra gang built monumental architecture at Borobudur and Prambanan in central Java, all this to extend their control over the hearts and minds of those doing all the work. By AD 950, the center of power shifted from central to eastern Java. The East Javanese kings of Kediri, Singhasari, and Majapahit maintained their workforce with rice agriculture. However, their profit centers were mainly one in rice and commodity trade within the Indonesian archipelago, and two, trade of both with China and India. Now, Majapahit. In AD 1293, Majapahit was established by Raden Wijaya, whose kingship began in his flight from Kublai Khan. He made his stand at Majapahit and whipped the Mongol army sent to defeat him. Raden Wijaya's kingship lasted until AD 1309. After 80 years, the reign of the Majapahit king Ham Wuruk ended in AD 1389, and by then Majapahit ruled the entire Indonesian archipelago. Ham Wuruk's prime minister Gajah Mada led many of the territorial conquests of the kingdom. Previous Javanese kingdoms had their power based in agriculture, but Majapahit took control of ports and shipping lanes and became Java's first commercial empire. With the death of Ham Wuruk and the coming of Islam to Indonesia, Majapahit went into decline. In the AD 1300s Java, the Majapahit kingdom would grow into a maritime empire that would control the trade and economy of the archipelago for many centuries. According to a Chinese source from the Ming Dynasty, Yingyai Chenglan, Ma Huan reported on the Javanese economy and market. He wrote, "Rice is harvested twice a year, and its grain is small. They also harvest white sesame and lentils. This land produces sappan wood, useful for producing red dye, diamond, sandalwood, incense, puyang pepper, cantharides, that is green beetles used for medicine, steel, turtles, tortoiseshell, strange and rare birds, such as the large parrot, as big as a hen, red and green parrots, 5 colored parrots that can imitate the human voice, also guinea fowl, peacock, beetle tree birds, pearl birds, and green pigeons. The beasts here are strange. There are white deer, white monkeys, and various other animals, pigs, goats, cattle, horses, poultry, and there are all types of ducks. For the fruits there are all kinds of bananas, coconut, sugarcane, pomegranate, lotus, mangosteen, watermelon, and lang cha, langsat, or lanzones. In addition, all types of squash and vegetables are here, or are there. By AD 790, the Javanese economy had been monetized, so taxes, fees, and fines were paid in cash using gold and silver coins. The Javan gold coins were seed-shaped, similar to corn, while the silver coins were similar to buttons. In AD 1300, during the reign of Majapahit's first king, imported Chinese copper cash replaced the indigenous coinage. In November 2008, it was reported that 10,400 ancient Chinese coins weighing 90 pounds were unearthed from a backyard in Sudoharo. These allowed specialists from the Indonesian Ancient Relics Conservation Bureau of East Java to perfect their knowledge of the coins of the early Majapahit era. Scholars assume the replacement of indigenous coinage with Chinese Kepeng standard coins was due to the increasing complexity of the Javanese economy that required standardization in trade and a reliable currency system that used much smaller denominations suitable for use in everyday market transactions. This latter role was not one for which gold and silver are well suited. Keeping Chinese coins, Kepeng Chinese coins, were thin, rounded copper coins with a square hole in their center. The hole was meant to tie together the money in a string of coins. In 1969, my team excavated a number of these in the top 5 centimeters of site number 1 on the Taltan River in northern British Columbia. Now, these small changes, the imported Chinese copper coins, enabled Majapahit further invention a method of savings by using a slitted earthenware coin container. These are commonly found in Majapahit ruins. The split is the small opening to put the coins in. The most popular shape is boar-shaped Seningan piggy bank. Some idea of a scale of the internal economy comes from data in inscriptions. The Canggu inscriptions dated to AD 1358 mentions 78 ferry crossings in the country of Mandala Java. Majapahit inscriptions mention a large number of occupational specialties, ranging from gold and silversmiths to drink vendors and butchers. These occupations began during the intensive professional specialization of labor that became manifest in ATC times. Now the proportion of the population earning an income from non-agrarian pursuits was higher than ever and would become even greater during the Majapahit era. Great wealth for landowners was reaped in the profits derived from intense irrigation, rice agriculture, and Majapahit's ports on the north coast were profit centers along the spice and opium trade route from Maluku that had to pass through Java. The Nagara Takama records that Majapahit attracted foreign merchants from India, Khmer, Siam, and China. The Yingai Shenglan records large numbers of Chinese traders and Muslim merchants from Arabia, India, and the Muslim kingdoms in Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula settled in Majapahit port cities. In particular, it mentions Tuban, Gresik, and Hujung Gulawa on Surabaya. In all these cases, a tax was levied on foreigners, including those who had semi-permanent residence in Java and conducted some type of enterprise other than foreign trade. The Majapahit Empire had trading links with the Chinese Ming Dynasty, Annam and Champa in today's Vietnam, Cambodia, Siamese, Ayutthaya, Burmese, Martaban, and South Indian Vijayanagara Empire. Now, on Sumatra, which is a large island in western Indonesia, part of the Sunda Islands, and the largest island that is entirely Indonesia, as the two larger islands, Borneo and New Guinea, are shared between Indonesia and other countries. It is the sixth largest island in the world at 473,500 square kilometers, and that area includes the adjacent Riau, Bangka Belitung Islands. Sumatra, as a name, comes from the Sanskrit names of Swarnadwipa, Island of Gold, and Swarnabhumi, Land of Gold, the island having become famous for its highland gold deposits. The original Sanskrit word had the additional connotation of gathering together of waters, sea, or ocean. Now, Sumatra has an elongated landmass situated along a diagonal northwest-southeast axis. The Indian Ocean borders the west, northwest, and southwest sides of Sumatra, with the island chain of Simeulue, Nias, and Mentawai bordering the southwestern coast. On the northeast, the narrow Strait of Malacca separates the island from the Malay Peninsula, and on the southeast, the narrow Sunda Strait separates Sumatra from Java. The northern tip of Sumatra borders the Andaman Islands, while on the lower eastern side are the islands of Bangka and Belitung, the Karamata Strait, and the Java Sea. The Bukit Barisan Mountains contain active volcanoes, forming the backbone of the island. The northeast sides are outlying lowlands with swamps, mangroves, and complex river systems. The equator crosses the island at its center on West Sumatra and Riau provinces. The climate of the island is tropical, hot and humid, with lush tropical rainforest once dominating the landscape. Sumatra has a broad spectrum of plant and animal species until the loss of half of its tropical rainforest in the last several decades left many species critically endangered, and these include the Sumatran ground cuckoo, the Sumatran tiger, the Sumatran elephant, rhinoceros, and orangutan. Deforestation by fire on the island has created a serious haze over the neighboring countries. ATCs, slavery, and feudalism. As we have seen, the post-Neolithic economy in the archipelago relied heavily on rice agriculture and forest products trade. ATCs and slave stage kingdoms produced tropical fruits, animal products, plant rosins, rattan, and hardwood for export. The Taru, Managara, and Mataram kingdoms were fiscally dependent on rice yields and taxes thereon. The archipelago was famous for its exports. Notable for our purposes are nutmeg and cloves from the Maluku Islands, pepper and cubeb from southern Sumatra and West Java, and rice from Java. On Sumatra, gold, copper, and tin were mined, and ivory and rhino horn was obtained primarily for export. On Borneo, hardwood and camphor resin was exported from the port of Barus. Likewise, sapan and sandalwood came from the Lesser Sunda Islands. Exotic bird feathers were obtained from the islands of eastern Indonesia. Foreign trade began with Indian trading kingdoms in the early 4th century AD. Once word spread of these Sumatra, Javanese, and other Indonesian island products, trade with the major civilizations of India and China was established. Indonesian servitude epic society as a whole boomed because of its strategic location. It was a thriving maritime route between India and China and polities in the Indonesian archipelago. In that period, the cosmopolitan trading empire of Sriwijaya arose in the 7th century AD. Now, taking a closer look at the kingdom Sriwijaya, it had its capital in what is now Palembang, dominating the region through trade and conquest through the 7th to 9th centuries AD. The empire helped spread the Malay culture through Nusantara. The empire was a thalassocracy, or maritime cartel, that extended its influence from island to island. Mount Palembang was the center for scholarly learning, and it was there that the Chinese Buddhist pilgrim I Ching studied Sanskrit in AD 670 before departing for India. On his journey to China, he spent 4 years in Palembang translating Buddhist texts and writing 2 manuscripts. Sriwijaya influence waned in the AD 1000s after it was defeated by the Chola Empire of southern India. At the same time, Islam made its way to Sumatra through Arabian and Indian traders in the 6th and 7th centuries AD. By the late 13th century, the monarch of the Samudra kingdom had converted to Islam. Marco Polo visited the island in AD 1292, and Ibn Battuta visited twice during 1345 to 1346. Samudra was succeeded by the powerful Aceh Sultanate, which survived into the 20th century. Then the Dutch were involved in the long and costly Aceh War from 1873 to 1903. In the world of commerce, Sriwijaya rapidly rose to be a far-flung empire, controlling the 2 passages between India and China, namely the Sunda Strait from Palembang and the Malacca Strait from Kedah. Arab accounts state that the empire of the Maharaja was so vast that in 2 years the swiftest vessel could not travel around all of its islands, which produced camphor, aloes, cloves, sandalwood, nutmegs, cardamom, and cubebs, ivory, gold, and tin, making the Maharaja as rich as any king in India. Other than fostering the lucrative trade relations with India and China, Sriwijaya also established a commercial link with Arabia. A messenger sent by Maharaja Sri Indra Varman to deliver his letter to Caliph Umar Abu Abdul Aziz of Umayyad in AD 718 was returned to Sriwijaya with Zanji, a black female slave from Zanj, the caliph's present for the Maharaja. Later, the Chinese chronicle mentioned Shi Li To Pa Mo, Sri Indra Varman, Maharaja of Shi Li Foti Shi in 724, had sent the emperor a Singhai, or that's the Chinese spelling of the Arabic Zanji, as a gift. Sriwijaya would continue to dominate the economy of the Indonesian archipelago until the AD 1200s. In AD 1017, a Sumatran king sent an envoy to China using the name of Sumatra as his land of origin. Arab geographers referred to the island as Lamri, Lamuri, Lambri, or Ramni, all during the AD 900s through the AD 1200s, and they described it as a kingdom near modern-day Banda Aceh. In AD 1275, Marco Polo named Sumatra as Samara or Samarca. In the AD 1300s, the merchant Ordoric of Pordenone used Sumultra for Samudra. Afterwards, European writers then used similar forms of the name for the island. European writers in the 1800s found that the indigenous inhabitants did not have a name for the island. In AD 1375, the name Sumatra became popular for the kingdom of Samudra Pasai. His kingdom was replaced by Sultanate of Aceh. By AD 1590, Islam was the dominant religion in Java, and the Islamic kingdoms of Dimate, Cirebon, and Banten were ascendant. And then in AD 1600, the Mataram Sultanate became the dominant power of central and eastern Java. The kingdoms of Surabaya, Cirebon, Mataram, and Banten were left to face the Dutch in the AD 1600s, and in AD 1602, Sultan Al-Adin Shah of Aceh wrote to Queen Elizabeth I of England, referring to himself as the King of Aceh and Sumatra. And with that, we conclude our discussion of the servitude epoch, slave and feudal periods. And you can see that the most important point probably here is to note that the mercantile capitalist class is burgeoning throughout this period within the otherwise feudal agricultural structure.